The morning sun streamed through the glass walls of my rooftop greenhouse, casting long shadows across rows of vibrant lettuce, tomatoes, and herbs growing in perfect vertical columns, 30 stories above Manhattan. My crazy dream had transformed into a thriving ecosystem that was about to reshape the future of food. Ms. Sullivan? My assistant Sarah's voice came through the intercom. The Whole Foods executive team is here for the tour. I smiled, remembering Thanksgiving dinner 5 years ago, when my Uncle Marcus had nearly choked on his wine laughing at my business plan. Urban farming? He'd sneered, while the rest of my family exchanged knowing looks. Growing lettuce on rooftops? Olivia, sweetheart, you have a degree from Stanford. Stop playing farmer and get a real job. Now, standing in my 50,000 square foot rooftop operation, watching robots precisely tend to thousands of plants growing in sophisticated hydroponic systems, I couldn't help but appreciate life's little ironies. Send them up, I replied, straightening my lab coat, the same one I'd worn during my first experiments in my tiny apartment, trying to prove that vertical farming could work in any urban space. The elevator doors opened, and 5 executives in pressed suits stepped out, their expressions shifting from skepticism to awe as they took in the scene before them. Leading the group was James Morrison, Whole Foods head of strategic sourcing. Ms. Sullivan, he breathed, staring at the vertical growing systems that stretched from floor to ceiling. This is remarkable. Thank you, I said, extending my hand. Welcome to Skyline Farms. Shall we begin the tour? As I led them through the facility, I couldn't help but think about how far we'd come. 5 years ago, I was a recently graduated environmental engineer with a crazy idea, transforming urban rooftops into high-tech farms that could feed entire cities. The traditional farming industry called it impossible, my family called it a waste of time, but I saw something they didn't, a solution to multiple problems at once: urban food deserts, carbon emissions from long-distance transportation, water waste in traditional agriculture, and the growing disconnect between people and their food. Our systems use 95% less water than traditional farming, I explained, showing them our proprietary hydroponic technology, and because we're growing vertically, we produce 200 times more food per square foot than conventional farms. But the cost, one executive started. I held up my hand, smiling. Our operating costs are 40% lower than traditional farms, thanks to our AI-driven automation and renewable energy systems. Those solar panels you saw on your way in, they power everything here, including our climate control systems. We moved to the packaging area, where robots were carefully harvesting and packaging fresh produce, from harvest to store shelf in under 3 hours. I said, no cross-country transportation, no cold storage facilities, no waste, just fresh, perfect produce delivered directly to local stores. James Morrison nodded slowly, taking notes on his tablet. And you say you can replicate this system? We already have, I replied, pulling up our monitoring dashboard on a nearby screen. 20 locations across New York City, producing enough food to feed 2 million people. We're expanding to Chicago, Los Angeles, and Miami next month. I didn't mention that those expansions were already operational, or that we had contracts pending with major property developers in 30 more cities. Let Whole Foods think they were getting in early. The quality is impressive, another executive noted, examining a perfectly formed head of lettuce. But can you maintain this level of consistency at scale? I tried not to smile too broadly. They were asking exactly the questions I'd prepared for, walking right into the presentation I'd spent years perfecting. Follow me, I said, leading them to our control room. Wall-to-wall screens displayed real-time data from every aspect of our operation: temperature, humidity, nutrient levels, growth rates, and harvest predictions. Our AI system monitors and adjusts every variable 24/7, I explained. Each plant gets exactly what it needs, when it needs it. We can predict our harvest quantities 6 weeks out with 99.8% accuracy. The executives exchanged glances. This was beyond what they'd expected. And the variety? James asked. We've seen the lettuce and tomatoes, but what else can you grow? I tapped my tablet, bringing up our product catalog. Currently, we produce 64 varieties of leafy greens, 12 types of tomatoes, 8 varieties of peppers, and an assortment of herbs and microgreens. We're also developing strawberries and other fruits. Ms. Sullivan, James said slowly, I think we should discuss distribution opportunities. Before I could respond, Sarah appeared at the door. I'm sorry to interrupt, but you have an urgent call from the governor's office regarding the food security initiative. Perfect timing. Sarah and I had practiced this interruption. knowing it would add just the right pressure to the negotiation. "Please excuse me for a moment," I said to the executives. "Sarah will show you our testing lab while I take this call." As I stepped away, I heard one executive whisper to another, "If we don't move on this now, Amazon will beat us to it." In my office, I took a moment to breathe, looking out over the Manhattan skyline. Below, millions of people were going about their days, not yet knowing that their relationship with food was about to change forever. My phone buzzed, a text from Uncle Marcus. "Saw your name in the Wall Street Journal, urban farming revolutionary." Maybe I was wrong about the rooftop lettuce. I set the phone down without replying. There would be time for family reconciliations later. Right now, I had a revolution to launch. The journey here hadn't been easy. After graduating, I'd spent 2 years working in my apartment, developing the initial technology. Every spare dollar went into research and prototypes. My parents thought I was having a quarter-life crisis. "Engineering jobs at Google don't wait forever," my mother would say during our weekly calls. "Your cousin Michael just got promoted to project manager." But I couldn't let go of the vision. I'd seen the problems in our food system firsthand during my college research: the waste, the inefficiency, the environmental impact. Someone had to find a better way. The breakthrough came in my 3rd year, when I developed a new hydroponic system that could increase yield density by 300%. That caught the attention of a small venture capital firm specializing in agricultural technology. "This isn't just innovative," my first investor had said, examining the prototype. "This is revolutionary." With that initial funding, I leased our first rooftop space, a small greenhouse on top of an old warehouse in Brooklyn. The locals thought I was crazy, until they tasted the first harvest. Word spread quickly. Local restaurants started asking for our produce, then high-end grocers, then school districts looking for fresh, local options for their cafeterias. By year 2, we had 5 locations and a waiting list of property owners wanting to convert their rooftops into farms. The technology was working better than I'd ever imagined, and the data we were collecting was invaluable. But it wasn't until the COVID pandemic that everything really accelerated. When traditional supply chains broke down, our local production model proved its worth. We never missed a delivery, never had a shortage. That's when the major players started paying attention. Now, standing in my office 30 stories above Manhattan, I was about to sign a deal that would take Skyline Farms national. Sarah knocked gently. "They're ready for you in the conference room. Legal has reviewed the preliminary agreement." I nodded, straightening my lab coat. "Let's not keep them waiting." Walking back to the conference room, I passed the wall where we displayed our first harvest photos. Small, imperfect vegetables grown in makeshift systems held together with zip ties and hope. Below them was our company motto: "The future of food grows up." The Whole Foods executives stood as I entered, their body language eager now, almost nervous. They knew they weren't the only ones interested in what we'd built. "Ms. Sullivan," James began, "we'd like to discuss a nationwide partnership. Exclusive distribution rights for Skyline Farms produce in all Whole Foods locations." I sat down, opened my laptop, and pulled up a document. "Actually, I have a different proposal, one that I think better aligns with our vision for the future of urban agriculture." For the next hour, I laid out our plan, not just for distribution, but for a complete reimagining of how cities produce and consume food. By the time I finished, they weren't just interested, they were true believers. As they left, James turned back. "You know, when I first heard about rooftop farming, I thought it was a gimmick. I've never been happier to be wrong." I smiled, remembering all the doubters, all the dismissive comments, all the well-meaning advice to get a real job. "That's the thing about the future," I replied. "Sometimes you have to grow it yourself." 6 months after the Whole Foods meeting, I stood in our newest facility in Chicago, watching as our automated systems installed rows of vertical growing tubes in what used to be an abandoned warehouse. The space would soon produce enough food to feed 500,000 people year-round. My phone buzzed, a news alert from Bloomberg: "Skyline Farms revolutionizes urban agriculture, stock soars 300% after IPO." Below it was a message from Uncle Marcus: "Just saw the market news. $8, $4 billion valuation? We need to talk." I smiled, remembering his words at last year's Christmas dinner. "Urban farming is a cute hobby, Olivia, but real businesses make real money." Sarah appeared at my side, tablet in hand. "The Singapore development team is ready for your call, and the White House confirmed tomorrow's meeting about the National Food Security Initiative." Before I could respond, another message lit up my phone, this one from my mother: "Saw you on the cover of Forbes, the woman feeding cities. Your father and I, we were wrong." Can we have dinner soon? The journey from crazy dreamer to agricultural revolutionary had been a whirlwind, especially these last 6 months. After the Whole Foods partnership, everything accelerated, but it wasn't just about business growth, we were changing how cities thought about food. Ms. Sullivan? A voice called from behind me. I turned to find Dr. Amelia Parker, our head of research and development, practically bouncing with excitement. You need to see this. She led me to our experimental section, where we tested new growing techniques and crop varieties. Remember that strawberry variant we'd been working on? The one designed for vertical systems? She pointed to a row of plants heavy with fruit. First harvest data just came in. Yield is 400% higher than traditional farming, with 80% less water usage. And the taste. She handed me a perfectly ripe strawberry. I bit into it, and the flavor exploded across my tongue. Sweet, complex, better than any strawberry I'd ever tasted. This changes everything, I said, already thinking of the implications. There's more, Amelia continued. The genetic markers we identified, they're applicable to other fruits. We could potentially develop vertical optimized versions of everything from blueberries to dwarf apple trees. This was exactly what we'd been working toward, not just growing existing crops more efficiently, but developing entirely new varieties specifically designed for urban vertical farming. My phone buzzed again. A message from James at Whole Foods. Competitors are launching copycat operations. We need to talk strategy. Of course they were. Success breeds imitation. But what our competitors didn't understand was that Skyline Farms wasn't just about the technology, it was about a complete reimagining of our relationship with food. Schedule a board meeting for tomorrow, I told Sarah, and set up a press conference for the strawberry announcement. It's time to show the world what's next. That evening, as the sun set over Chicago's skyline, I took a video call in our rooftop conference room. On the screen were agricultural ministers from 12 different countries, all eager to discuss implementing our systems in their major cities. The potential impact on food security is unprecedented, the French minister was saying, but the costs. I shared my screen, showing them our latest data. Initial setup costs are offset within 18 months. After that, production costs are 60% lower than traditional farming, and that's before factoring in environmental benefits and reduced transportation needs. As I walked them through the numbers, I thought about all the late nights spent refining these systems, all the failed experiments, all the moments of doubt, but every setback had taught us something valuable. The breakthrough that really changed everything came from an unexpected place. We'd been struggling with energy efficiency in our climate control systems when I remembered something from my Stanford days, a paper about heat distribution in termite mounds. That led to a complete redesign of our airflow systems, cutting energy usage by 40% overnight. Nature, it turned out, had already solved many of our problems, we just had to pay attention. After the call, I walked through our experimental section, checking on the new varieties under development. Besides the strawberries, we were working on compact citrus trees, vertical grape systems, and even a new type of wheat designed for indoor cultivation. Sarah appeared with my evening briefing. The Dubai project is ahead of schedule. Their first facility will be operational next month, and the Tokyo team just sent updated designs for the subway station installations. I nodded, scanning through the reports. We were no longer just putting farms on rooftops, we were integrating them into the very fabric of urban architecture. New buildings were being designed with our systems built in, and old structures were being retrofitted to include growing spaces. A notification popped up on my tablet. My sister Madeline had just tagged me in a social media post. It was a photo of produce from her local grocery store, showing my name on the packaging. Her caption read, "Remember when we thought that Olivia Sullivan was crazy? Now she's feeding the world. Proud doesn't begin to cover it. Hashtag Skyline Farms, hashtag Proud Sister." It was nice, but it also stirred up complicated feelings. Where was this support when I was maxing out credit cards to fund my research? Where was the pride when I was sleeping on a cot in my first greenhouse, manually adjusting temperature controls every 2 hours? My phone rang, Uncle Marcus again. This time, I decided to answer. "Olivia," he started, his voice unusually humble, "I owe you an apology." "Just one?" I couldn't help asking. He chuckled nervously. "Fair enough. Listen, I was wrong, not just about the business, but about everything. What you've built, it's extraordinary." "Thank you," I said simply. "Was there something specific you wanted to discuss?" "Yes, actually, the investment firm I work for. We're interested in your next funding round, whatever terms you want to name." I smiled. thinking of all the times he'd lectured me about real investing versus hobby projects. I appreciate the offer, I said, but our next round is already oversubscribed. Maybe check back in a few years? After hanging up, I walked to the edge of the rooftop garden. The city stretched out below me, lights twinkling in the gathering dusk. Somewhere down there, people were sitting down to dinners made with food we'd grown right here in their city. Tomorrow, I would announce our new developments, the breakthrough with the strawberries, the international expansion, the integration of our systems into public transportation hubs. The world was finally ready for the future we'd been building. Sarah appeared one last time. Final numbers for today: 8 million meals delivered, 0 transportation emissions, 97% reduction in water usage compared to traditional farming. I nodded, thinking of how far we'd come from that first tiny greenhouse. Send me the latest data on the school program too. I want to update the board on how many students are learning about urban agriculture. Because that was the real revolution, not just changing how we grow food, but changing how people think about it. Every school we partnered with, every community garden we supported, every person who tasted a perfectly ripe tomato grown in their own neighborhood was part of this transformation. The next morning, I arrived early at our Chicago facility. The sunrise painted the greenhouse glass in shades of gold and pink, creating halos around the thousands of plants growing in perfect vertical rows. As I prepared for the board meeting, I pulled up our company's mission statement, the same one I'd written in my apartment 5 years ago, growing tomorrow's cities, today. Below it, I'd recently added a new line, because sometimes the craziest dreams are the ones that change the world. My phone buzzed with another news alert: urban farming revolution, how Skyline Farms is transforming cities into self-sustaining food systems. I smiled, thinking of all the people who said it couldn't be done, the experts who claimed vertical farming would never scale, the investors who said the technology was too expensive, the family members who thought I was throwing my life away. Now our systems were feeding millions, our technology was being adopted globally, and we were just getting started. The future of food wasn't in massive rural farms, it was in cities, growing up instead of out, bringing people closer to their food than ever before. Sarah knocked on my door. They're ready for you in the boardroom, and your parents are in the lobby. They don't have an appointment, but I took a deep breath. Send them up. It's time they saw what their crazy daughter built. Because success isn't just about proving others wrong, it's about proving yourself right. And sometimes the best revenge isn't in showing people they were wrong, but in showing them a future they couldn't even imagine. If you've ever had a dream that others dismissed, ever stood alone believing in something bigger than yourself, or ever felt the weight of doubt pushing against your vision, remember this: sometimes the craziest ideas are the ones that change the world. So dream big, grow bigger, and never let anyone's limitations become your reality. Because the future belongs to those who dare to grow it themselves. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories about turning impossible dreams into world-changing realities. The revolution isn't just about farming, it's about believing in the power of one person to change everything. Remember, every forest started with a single seed. What will you grow?